Today I'm going to review the movie The Nines with Ryan Reynolds, which is a film that he did in 2007 that's kind of similar to Free Guy. And the main reason that I wanted to review this from an esoteric perspective is to explain how it ties into what I've been doing with the Johnny Depp movies that most people seem to not want to look at, although it is incredibly important. Film and television is not what we think it is. I guess you could say in a way it is a message from your subconscious, or a message from the higher realm, a message from you to remind you of who you are. And if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you will receive the messages that are embedded within. The Nines is very blatant. There's not a whole lot to decode or anything in here. This video obviously is going to have spoilers. If you haven't seen it and you don't want spoilers, then go watch the movie first. And I will leave a link to it in the description box. And then come back and watch this, because this movie requires viewing twice. When I went back and watched it the second time, I noticed more of the details, all of the connections that are made, the subtleties of the worlds overlapping and interlacing and melting together in its subtle brilliance was apparent the second time. The first time you watch it, it's more like you're watching it from the perspective of someone who is coming to the truth for the first time. The experience that you have as a viewer watching the movie the first time is the experience that the Ryan Reynolds character, who I'm going to call G in the three different stories, where he plays an actor, a TV creator, and a video game creator. So in each story, he's essentially a god, and so he can't escape being a god no matter what he does, because he is a god. He just forgot who he was because he became so attached to the physical world that he created. The roles and the plots of each of the stories that he plays in are identical. There's little moments that happen that are identical. There's quotes, there's phrases that are repeated, which is what I have been revealing through the Johnny Depp videos. He is playing the same story in every film he does over and over again, because it is representative of his life story. And this is what this film is showing you. This is not just pertaining to them, to the movie stars. This pertains to you. If you are a real living being, this story is about you and how your life story is repeated over and over and over. The people in your life, the stories, the scenarios, everything is repeated over and over again in different ways, such as if you watch the Dark Shadows video, the example that I showed of where Winona Ryder's character was reflected in Josette. She fell off a cliff, landed on the rocks, and Winona Ryder herself tells a story of how she was falling off an emotional cliff, a psychological cliff, where she was spiraling into the depths of depression and despair. Emotion is water, and she landed on the rocks. Her triggering moment, if you will, was that she was driving around LA feeling depressed and couldn't understand why, and then she sees a cover of herself on Rolling Stone magazine. It's not the identical story of her literally falling off a cliff onto the water, onto the rocks. However, it is the same story, because those are symbols and allegorical metaphors for her life story. So these are the indicators that you have to look for in your own life. This is the story of the stars being played out in your life. And if you are able to determine by looking at film and television which story is pertinent to your life, you will be able to figure out what your life story is, which is why I am doing these videos. Each movie is a scenario in your life. But if you look at your life, there are scenarios where one story begins and that story ends, and then another story begins and that story ends. And so you can look at your life in terms of stories or scenarios or chapters and separate it into these little movies. Ryan Reynolds is a multi-universe being. He's called a 9. If God is a 10, this is theoretical supreme being, then Ryan Reynolds is a 9. And so the 9s represent Christ consciousness, God's, the creator's higher consciousness. And humans are 7s. So in terms of what we know about this place, humans being 7s means they are NPCs. So they are thought forms in his created world. He created the world and he decided that he was going to play within it and then forgot who he was. Some of these beings are 7s, which are extensions of his consciousness or his subconscious, trying to remind him who he is. Like the Melissa McCarthy character. There's other characters who show up repeatedly in his scenarios that are 9s. In some cases, especially with the character named S, she tends to behave in a sort of aggressive, negative way because she's shocking him to awaken. And so you could perceive her to be an enemy or an antagonist, which you could perceive this realm of the elites or the trauma, the 911, the emergency. He's seeing 9s everywhere, indicating to him that something is off about this world. This is the actor character named Gary. The movie begins with him burning his stuff from a bad breakup. And he has a t-shirt on that says, Veritas looks me, which means truth enlightens me, or truth is my light. So he's burning the past, which is kind of indicative of setting fire to the world, which is what he has to do. He has to cut ties with the past, and by setting fire to it, that's the light. The truth is what he needs to have in order to remember who he is. He burns down his house, and then his publicist puts him up in this house, and it ends up being the same house that each of the other 2 characters live in. So this is Gary the actor, and he moves into the house of the writer, but in this reality, the writer is not him, it's somebody else. You never meet him, but the writer in the other reality is him, and he's gone to film a TV pilot, so he's away for 6 weeks, but he ends up coming back while Gary is still living in the house, and then the realities start to overlap. This to me is representative of where you live. If you look around your personal neighborhood and where you live, there are indicators that will tell you that there's a reason why you're living there. The city that you live in, the street that you live on, the number of the house that you live in, they're all indicators of who you are. This woman is Melissa McCarthy. In every single reality, she's his number 1 fan. The dialogue is so brilliant that it has multiple layers to it. The subtext is basically telling you the truth. She's his number 1 fan in every single reality. So in this one, she's literally a fan, but she's also his publicist. And then they end up becoming really good friends while he's staying there. And then in another scenario, he's married to her. And then in another scenario, they're best friends, and he gets her roles in his shows. So he's reading this book, Voltaire Candide. There's a quote in it, the best of all possible worlds, that his neighbor brings up. This is S. This is the woman who's one of the 9s here. She's come to Earth to wake him up, to remind him of who he really is. And in every scenario, she plays the antagonist. She basically screws with his world every time she comes into it. But later she explains that she has to play by his rules because he's the one who created the world. She can't just come in and mess with him on her terms because he wouldn't understand that, which is why for us who are awakening to the truth, we can't be told in a blatant way because we wouldn't understand what we're hearing, which is why we have to be the ones to seek out the truth but also be receptive to it. And so it has to be, the truth has to be delivered to us on our terms, has to be delivered to us in a way that we will understand it so we remember who we are, as opposed to having it thrust upon us in a way that doesn't make sense to us. You have to be speaking to us in our language, so it has to be more subtle. And yet at the same time, she knows that in order to snap him out of his stupor, out of his attachment to the physical, she has to shock him. So that's why she plays the role of the antagonist in every scenario. He finds a disc in this player that's left by the TV writer who owns this house, which is him in another world, and it's called Knowing. In itself, knowing, gnosis, knowing who you are, he's trying to remind himself of who he really is, because he keeps creating these situations for himself. And this G at the end kind of looks like a 9. This actor character stars in a TV show called Crime Lab, and the end of the word crime, the E is a 9. So even in that show, he's trying to remind himself of who he is. You could look at it as you leaving clues for you from, I guess you could say, other realities, if that's how you want to see it, in a sense that each of these worlds is a split piece of himself, and he's got to pull all of the fragmented pieces of himself back together again by remembering who he is. She starts acting a little bit strange for a sort of real life scenario where she starts to sing the song "Is That All There Is?" At first you're just kind of annoyed by it watching it the first time because it just seems out of place and kind of weird, but she's trying to remind him of who he is by singing this song and planting seeds in every reality. Songs have a tendency to stick with people more. First of all, they're repetitive, but music also helps you remember. This being the universe, the one song, everything is sound and numbers and music and numbers, and so music also travels through dimensions. When the TV writer comes back home, he says he thought he heard a woman singing, which is this woman singing. The music is traveling through the worlds, traveling through the dimensions. S calls back to this and says, "Is that all there is?" as a reminder that's supposed to trigger him to this world so that he can connect the worlds together. He's caught his toe in a mouse trap and runs to the bus stop. This girl is in multiple realities as well, and she's also in his TV show in the other world called Knowing. This TV show is in every reality. Here the realities are merging. The little girl plays his daughter in the third reality, which is why she's pointing at him when he asks where her father is. She refers to the car because he left her and her mom to get help to fix the car. She's like an apparition because she disappears. Now there's the poster of Knowing with her face on it, but because her eyes are blocked out, he doesn't recognize her. It says, "Sometimes fate is chosen for you." And on the other side of this poster was a 9. Gary bonds with Margaret because it's in his story for them to be good friends in every world. However, it always seems to go bad. So eventually their friendship fades a little bit. They have some trouble. S has been watching G have fun with M, and she storms over. She comes over as jealous. Again, she plays the antagonist. She's a bit nasty, jealous, not pleasant, because her purpose is to disrupt him. And her purpose as well is to get him detached from the Melissa McCarthy character, because he's formed an attachment to her. The attachment to her is what's holding him to this place. That line of dialogue, on a scale of 1 to 10, you belong with the nines, is actually quite brilliant, because this is the subtle way of her telling him who he is. And because he's totally ignorant of it, he can't hear it. He can't recognize it. But it's the planting of the seeds, that she is just planting the seeds so that eventually he'll put the pieces together to remember who he is. So this movie, I guess you could compare it a little bit to The Truman Show. And now he's seeing this Sarah woman. She's being jealous, antagonistic. And now she's coming over and attacking or accusing this M woman of being a liar. So now, who's he supposed to trust? So this is the moment where he realizes something's wrong with the world. And it's interesting that he chooses S to confide in about it. He doesn't know to trust M because of what was said between the two women. Gary asks M to tell him about the nines. The nines? Yes, because they're showing up everywhere, he says, and I don't know why. She says her best guess is his subconscious trying to remind him of who he is. So she is his subconscious telling him this, because she's a 7, she's an NPC, and it's him using her as a vehicle to communicate to him. So this happens in your own life if you are aware of it, in terms of other beings communicating things to you that help you to realize the truth, whether it's in a message or like an email or a comment or what have you. It's you using other beings to communicate to yourself. M explains to G that he's a 9, but out of context it makes no sense to him. They have known each other for 25 years, but not as Gary, as other avatars in other realities. So this is a prime example of somebody trying to tell you the truth when you're just starting to see things, because what someone who's perhaps at a higher level of truth, I guess if you could explain it that way, or a more advanced level of awareness, if you're just beginning to understand the truth and someone from a more advanced perspective is trying to talk to you or explain things to you, or even if you just look at it in terms of somebody who knows something that you have no awareness of, it's like they're talking to you in a foreign language. So he can't understand where she's coming from or what she's talking about because he's got no awareness of it yet. And it sounds completely foreign to him. Gary asks if this is a dream, hell, purgatory, if he's in a coma. No, this is a real reality, but he's not who he thinks he is. So he goes out to talk to S, and she says, you can't trust her, she's a 9. So his subconscious knows who S is. If he's a 9 and she's a 9, why can't he trust her? He threatens to step over the boundary that has been set for him as he's under house arrest. When Gary steps over the line, he triggers the end of the world, oblivio sebit. So that's the end of that world. Now we're in another world, which is actually happening simultaneously in sync with the reality that we just saw. And this world is called behind the screen, and we live in the screen. So this is a reality TV show that's being filmed based on this character. Even though in this scenario he's a TV writer, he's also an actor because he's the main character in the reality show. It's a bit of a combination of the two worlds. He's still on TV. We are in a TV show. This is the showrunner or the show writer of the show called Knowing, that he lived in that house where the actor ended up living in. So the two realities have overlapped already. So here he mentions Crime Lab, which is the show that he stars in as an actor in the other reality. And he keeps referencing Crime Lab in a little bit of a derogatory sense, that it's not good enough. So knowing is a little bit better. So here she is again. And in this scenario, she plays a dramaturgy who's here to help him develop his TV show in a sort of intermediary position between the producer, Roger, and him. She starts out as kind and supportive, ends up being antagonistic and totally disrupts his world. Same setup in every scenario. He casts Melissa in the TV show Knowing. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because they're shooting this scene, which is the scene from the other reality we have yet to see, where she plays his wife and the little girl plays his daughter. So here he returns to his house that he's been away from for 6 weeks while the actor's been living here, and he says, "This home just doesn't feel like my house anymore." And it's kind of strange, because even though he's been away, but it's his house, but he's been living in it as the actor. So that, I guess that energy has been kind of dominating this place while he's been gone. They're playing the disc that was found in the recorder of his house by the actor. And this is the scene that was filmed in the woods or the park, where they went for a hike and they're stuck in the car. Keep in mind as well that this scene is being filmed by the reality TV crew. So it's a show within a show. The character named Mary is in the show, played by Melissa, based on the other reality of real life Mary. She ends up watching this very scenario through this video camera. So she becomes aware of the other reality, which is this reality TV show. The overlap is coming through in a TV show. S's character, she is aware of the fact that she's playing a role in this world. So she mentions the moment Mary's freaked out. She sees that the character of M is overlapping with the real M. I don't think that the G character realizes what's going on, and so she's trying to emphasize it. M asks the little girl, "How do you feel about some blue corn enchiladas? Should we ask Daddy when he gets back?" This is another scene which is enacted from the final reality yet to come. In the next reality, Ryan Reynolds' character plays the father of this little girl. He goes off to try and find someone to help with the car because the battery has died while they went on this hike. So she says that he's not coming back. So this little girl seems to have an awareness of who he is and what's going on, perhaps because she's a child, but she's not a 9. Gavin asks M to add in a wild line, "How could you?" This is to appease S's request on clarifying why Mary is so freaked out by seeing the scene they are in on the camera. They do a review or a screening, a test screening of the pilot episode. There's a guy in here who previously played Gary's parole officer in the first scenario. He sees G through the one-way mirror even though he's not supposed to. He speaks plainly that the show Knowing isn't real, yet G doesn't understand. He is a 9, and he's in every scenario, and he shows up to, again, jolt him out of his stupor, to try and wake him up and tell him, you're trapped here like the rest of us. Wake up, get out. Now, oblivio acevit is Latin for oblivion sets in, or forgetting or forgetfulness. It's also indicative of the end of the world. Now they're mentioning Gianni Versace being murdered outside of his home. Even though they're in different realities, the base reality is identical in each one. So these events are consistent with each reality, consistent with this reality, showing that these worlds are happening simultaneously within the same base reality. They exist parallel to each other in a frequency, which is why they can overlap. which is why he lives in the same house and he runs into himself sometimes. S has told him look for the nines because the nines are the people who reviewed his TV show at the screening, the test screening, and they're the ones who liked it the most. So they'll have more vested interest in giving you constructive feedback. So he leaves himself a note, and in the actor reality, he found the note, but even though it was in his handwriting, he didn't recall writing it. And that's what caused him to look for nines and then asked, what is the nines? So this looking for the nines was a trigger for him in his other reality. So now S is starting to become antagonistic. She is lying to G about M, saying she's the problem with the show and she has to go. In a sense, she's telling him the truth, that she's the problem because G is attached to M and he won't leave the world because he's attached to her. He meets with this other actress who could potentially replace Melissa, and when you listen to his dialogue here, he says, "In my head, I wrote the role for Melissa. I can only imagine it with her. I don't know if I want it to work with this other actress." He created this reality in his head in which the role was created for Melissa, which is why she's in it. He can only imagine it with her. So again, the imagination is what created this world. The fact that he says, I don't know if I want it to work with her, he is creating the scenario where the show will not work because it doesn't have Melissa in it. And that's what happens. It ends up not working. When G gets stressed, he plays video games in Koreatown. For him, it's therapy, a form of escapism. Even in this reality, he brings in the other reality that's yet to come through the video game. He loves the games. You kind of lose yourself a little bit in them, which is what he's done by losing himself in this physical reality. He has this addiction to losing himself in these false realities, which is later revealed. Right in this moment that he's talking about how much he loves these video games, he's creating the new reality in which he is the video game creator and he loses himself in that reality. So a piece of his consciousness is moving into a new reality, which you could also parallel with what's happening right now, in that we're putting our consciousness into the internet through the metaverse. By putting our energy and attention to it, we escape a little bit. We lose ourselves a little bit by saying the words, we lose ourselves. You lose consciousness of the reality that you are in when you lose yourself in something that you do, which is the act of creation. You lose yourself. Like Eminem says, lose yourself in the music. The moment you own it, you'll never let it go. It is putting your consciousness into something else and bringing it to life. He's struggling with the decision to let Melissa go, and because his world ends. And in this moment, he's admitting that he is attached to Melissa and has a hard time letting her go. So he can't let that happen. And that's exactly what happens in the end, is that he has to let her go and the world ends. So he has some subconscious awareness of why he's clinging to her. And it's kind of a selfish reason, because it isn't about her, it's about him. His world ends and he can't let that happen. So in this moment, he confesses to Melissa that he heard singing in his house. And this is the singing I mentioned earlier with S. Singing, is that all there is? The way I see it, the network is representative of the Matrix. He has all these characters inside his head. He's created these characters, and in order to bring them to life, he is a creator through either a video game or a TV show or an actor, and he wants them to live. I'm the only way that they can, which is a subconscious or a Freudian slip, an unconscious, subconscious way of telling the truth that he's not even aware of. And he's saying this is the only way that they can. Either she goes or they go. The truth is coming through yet again. he has to break it off with her, which he did in the first reality. He was hostile towards her and then ended the world by crossing the line. And here, again, he's crossing the line with his friendship with her by betraying her. Melissa gets rightfully upset and indignant. She says he's upset because he can't control her. His puppets are off their strings, saying things he didn't write, and reality scares him. Gavin throws it in her face that he created her, which he did. And she's kind of pulling away from him. I mean, you can look at this as like the teenager rebelling against their father or their parents and saying, well, I'm now an independent person and you don't have control over me. It's similar to when if you're a writer in any sense and you've ever created characters and you write a story, the characters start to have lives of their own. And this is what is happening here, is that the characters he created, her specifically, have lives of their own and are declaring their independence. They want to continue to live without him. Basically, they're a form of AI. The Free Guy example of the NPCs wanting to continue their existence within the game without the gods that created them. And they do continue to exist within the game as they're basically a form of artificial intelligence. She's a form of artificial intelligence. The NPCs in this reality are a form of artificial intelligence. They were created by the egoic consciousness. Gavin goes to New York as he believes his pilot is screening on the network. He talks to the cameraman of the reality show he's in, sympathizing with the characters in his own shows as a creator who uses them as pawns in his dramas for good TV. He himself is now feeling like a pawn in the reality show as he's feeling insecure about the fate of his TV show, knowing. He's a cruel god. He creates these characters and then he kills them off and he puts them through hell. And then he recognizes that he's within a show himself and he himself is disposable. Kill off the hero. No one will see it coming. I dare you. He's basically talking to himself, like, end the world. Kill off the main character. Kill off the hero. Because he himself doesn't actually exist in this reality. So he is disposable. He can't imagine the world without Melissa McCarthy. And when he's saying this is so surreal, it's not at all how I imagined, he's referring to that part. And he's in the elevator, which is a mirrored reality, a mirrored cube with lights. This is a self-contained microcosm of the physical world that he lives in. Now, the reason that this is referring back to the moment where he says, I can't imagine this world without Melissa in it, is because in that moment, he was creating the world where his show doesn't exist anymore because it can't exist without Melissa in it. And here's what happens. The elevator opens and it's Dahlia, the actress who was supposed to replace Melissa. Notice she calls him God. She enters the elevator into his reality show world and expresses how surreal it is running into him literally a moment after he said he felt it was surreal. So her saying surreal and him saying or recognizing that he just said that is a synchronicity, which is indicating what's about to come. Dahlia then informs him that she won't be on his show after all. Gavin calls to get confirmation. He says, I wonder if even my show exists, which it doesn't anymore because he put an end to it. He says, I can't imagine it without Melissa McCarthy. He replaced her. And so now that show is dead. It doesn't exist without her. And so now he's blaming this Susan character because she's the one who told him to replace her. He also says it's as if they dropped off the face of the earth. Well, that's because they did. He de-manifested them. In getting rid of the existence of his show, they no longer need to communicate with him. So he's cut ties with them. The phrase, your show's been pulled off the air, is synonymous with the world does not exist anymore. Pulled off the air, broadcast network, because it's a frequency. And so that frequency is dead. It's not in the ether anymore. So she says, I get these missives from Roger and the higher powers. The higher powers being the nines. G confronts the producer of the show that Dahlia is in, who reveals to Gavin that Susan was aware that Dahlia wasn't available, and so she deliberately screwed him over. Gavin then confronts Susan, who makes excuses, claiming they're only picking up 2 dramas. The 2 dramas are the 2 remaining worlds. This world and the world that is to come, where he's a video game creator. The other world in which he's an actor is gone. But in this scenario, he is a reality star, in which is why it says the rest is what? Reality? Okay, so she says, I had to get you away from her. She was holding you back. You had to give her up. Come on, G. So S refers to him as G, because in every reality his name starts with G, because his true name is G. G in every reality. Whether it's Gary, Gavin, or Gabriel, it doesn't matter. He can't escape it because G is God. G gets frustrated by S's obstinance and he slaps her. So S uses this as the perfect opportunity to throw out the connector line, is that all there is, hoping he connects this world with his actor world. And this is another connector. Do you feel like a man? Because I'll tell you a little secret, you're not. He's not a man, he's a god. G is talking to the cameraman from the reality show, but this woman points out there's no one there. I didn't show this earlier, but this character here was in the other reality when he was an actor. She helped him get high on crack. And he also met her at a street intersection. So here she is again at this intersection, randomly meets her, and she is a 9, but he doesn't know that. So now he's realized there's something wrong. I thought I was on a reality show, but I'm not. What I think happened here is the reality show vanishes because she planted the thought in his head, and so that's what de-manifested the show. So he has a 9 over his head while the others have 7s over their heads. Free Guy also had things spinning above people's heads and spinning in virtual reality or invisible reality that you can't see. And it says exit now. Unsaved changes will be lost. Cancel or exit. When he was at the video game in Koreatown, and he said that what reality needs is a reset button. So now he's created a reset button. I've said in many of my decodes and many of my videos that the exit is the exit. The X is the way out. There's multiple meanings to the letter X. If you X out, you cross out, you merge heaven and earth, you become aware and you exit out. So there's the red exit and the green exit. You can leave by the fire exit or you can leave by the regular exit, which is the heart, joining your heart with mind, waking up to who you really are. Now we're back to where we left off as the actor being told about who he really is. This time she tells him who he is, because he's ready to hear it. He's a multi-dimensional being with almost infinite power. This body, this avatar, is just one of his incarnations. G asks if he's God. She says technically no. If God is a 10, a theoretical ultimate, then he's more of a 9. Well, what is she? She's a 7, a human, an NPC. She says he created this world on a whim. As we have seen, he creates worlds with thoughts, and stuck around to see how they turned out. He can also destroy the world with a thought. So he created this world with thought, and your thoughts create worlds, create scenarios. Here we enter the third world, knowing, which the TV show was created on. In this scenario, G, Gabriel, is married to M, Mary, and the little girl is his daughter. The Melissa McCarthy character is wearing the same outfit as in the scenario in the TV show, in which she's filming this very scene, and she's holding the camera that she is going to watch the video from the previous scenario that has the reality TV show on it. The battery on the car is dead, which is what prompts him to leave here to go and seek help. And in doing so, he runs into S. She starts out as kind of friendly, kind of skeptical, then she walks away in being her typical mean self, but eventually comes back. This is the very same scene that was shown in the previous scenario that they were watching on the screen in the reality TV show of the pilot that they had just filmed, which was based on this scenario. Now, the Ryan Reynolds character, G, he is the writer for this show, and yet he was not present when this happened. So he wrote the show in the other scenario, which led to the creation of this scenario in which he is now living. And this scenario is happening simultaneously with the other scenarios. Meanwhile, S comes back to get G and says she recognized him from her boyfriend's video game magazine. She's planting seeds for him to remember. So she's very friendly and she's very warm, but she's still weird. She says weird things, disturbing things, antagonistic things, and again, she's behaving like the evil person. S drops another seed. You're a video game god. She tells him about her ex-boyfriend who used to play video games 24/7, which is referring to G. She says he was addicted to Evercrack. Now, it's a small thing, but it's a significant thing. Again, like I was mentioning before with the Winona Ryder falling off the rock and the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, same thing. She says he used to play Evercrack, and as the actor in the other reality, he was using crack. Small thing, but it's a significant thing. What's worse than crack? Super crack? Now she's making it into a big deal. And she later calls back to this saying that he's addicted. He's addicted to being in this reality, in this world that he created, just like a crack addict. He says you had an account on part of your world and you didn't even know it. Again, dropping a seed. I'm part of your world and you didn't even know it. She's been in every scenario and he doesn't even know it. I'm from the nines, playing in your world, and you don't know it. Back at the car, the little girl is watching the video of the reality show on this camera and realizing that something's not right. So back to S and G. S is speaking rather cryptically, but plainly trying to wake him up by planting hints and seeds. It's like you play multiple characters at once. You're in multiple realities at once. He says most people do, but you're not most people. You created the world. You know all the secret codes. If you remember my Decode on Free Guy, which is now on BitChute, by the way, the codes reveal the reality. If you can read the codes, then you can figure out what's being told to you, what's really going on here. This is why decodes and understanding the language, understanding how all the languages melt together is really important. If you can read the codes, you can read your reality. And then he says, what, like God mode? It's when you have all the powers and you can't be killed. This is what happens when you realize who you really are. For example, because he's subconsciously creating these worlds, he's not aware that his thoughts, his words, his imagination creates worlds, creates these new scenarios, and he's not aware of it because he forgot who he is. The moment he remembers who he is, he can be a deliberate creator. He's in God mode. And that is what happens to us when we realize and remember who we really are. So when he says the game isn't fun unless there are rules, that's why he forgot who he was, because he wanted to experience this reality as a human, which is what we did. Which is why when we're coming to the truth and people try to tell us, which is our subconscious, which is expressed as the nines, trying to tell us, hey, you are the creator, this is a false reality, none of this is real, wake up. remember who you really are, we don't believe it because we lied to ourselves. We believe that this is all there is. We believe the physical is real. We believe that there are gods above us. If you don't come to this conclusion and this realization, you'll never get to the other levels of awareness of who you really are. The major hurdle is in realizing that you lied to yourself. You are the one who forgot. Nobody's lying to you but you. So he makes a slip of the tongue and calls her Sarah, which is her name in another reality, and in here her name is Sierra. I'm sure many of you have experienced something like this, so maybe there's something more to it. Maybe that's because you're remembering their being from another reality. Em asks her daughter if they should go out for blue corn enchiladas, and they'll ask Daddy when he comes back. The daughter says Daddy's not coming back. Now, if you remember, this is another scene that was from the previous scenario in which they were reviewing the pilot. And this is the moment when S recognizes that M is freaked out. So the realities are overlapping and collapsing in on themselves. It's approaching the singularity. S and G stop in the woods. She gives him her water laced with GHB. She kisses him. Now, this kiss is supposed to remind him of their connection to each other. This is exactly the same as the moment in Free Guy when Millie kisses Guy to bring back his memories. This is the true love's kiss. She is his partner in the nines, and so she's come down into his reality to wake him up and say, hello, we have a life outside of this world and you need to go back home. It's true love's kiss. Exactly the same as in Free Guy. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link to the video in the description box to BitChute. I highly recommend you go and watch that. She kissed him, but he stops her because he has a wife and daughter waiting for him. She says, where are they? Where are you? He says, where's your car? She says, there is no car. It was a pretense to get you on your own. He feels dizzy from the drug. It appears to him as if she is evil. She is, the Satan. She's the adversary. Because he doesn't realize that she's trying to help him. She's trying to wake him up. Again, this is reflective of all of the evil in the world that's trying to wake us up. This drug is helping him collapse all of the realities. He's starting to have flashbacks of his other realities. Suddenly all the pieces come together for him. All the seeds that were planted now make sense. S had to get him away from M. He's not a man, he's a god. S can get him out of here. All the nines showing up in his reality, losing his TV show, seeing these people in every reality. G asks why S is doing this to him, and she replies, he did this to himself. He's an addict. He's addicted to these realities. And the first step is admitting it. Just like the first step in breaking out of the fear trap, the trap that holds you here to this physical reality is knowing that no one out there lied to you. You did this to yourself. See, she calls him a crackhead. In the first scenario, as an actor, he was literally a crackhead. He's manifesting this addiction in these realities. Now that he's receptive, she can tell him the truth, just as he's being told the truth at the same time in reality number 1 by Melissa, because it's seeping through all the realities at once as they're happening simultaneously. He made a universe. He stayed to see how it played out, then stayed 24/7. He's been gone 4,000 years. S came looking for him because in his other reality, she is his girl. S came looking for G because S is Sophia, and he forgot who he was. He forgot this wasn't real. Coming into his world, they can't just be who they are in the other world. They have to take on an avatar. They have to play by his rules, use the language that he speaks. In order to wake him up, they had to speak to him in his language. In order to wake us up, they have to speak to us in our language, which is why it's coded. The code reveals the truth. You can only see it if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. They can't force it upon us. We have to want it. You have to want the truth to find it. By playing the adversary, the Nines showed him how limited and corrupt his world was. This is why our world reflects back to us its limited and corrupt nature. While all this is happening to G, M has been watching the video of his other lives. She's now aware of who he is and the truth of this world. Oddly enough, M is watching herself as Margaret, in the first reality, tell G, the actor, who he really is, which was not even part of the reality show. It was in an entirely different world. So how did it get on the camera? G must confront the fact that he has to let go, but he's having a hard time detaching from the physical world, detaching from his attachment to Melissa and the young girl, because he's perceived them as his family. And he's now realized that they aren't his family, but he still loves them. He still cares about them. He still loves the world that he created. He still has an attachment to it. And so in the moment, he's in denial. He is negotiating. He's trying to compromise. So can I have my cake and eat it too? Can I still be here and not be here? Can I be in the world and not of it? Can I play here and not fall prey to being attached to the physical again and not forget who I am again? And she says, no, you can't. It took 4,000 years to get him to remember who he is, and they can't do that again. He can't do that again. Now that he's remembered who he is, he has to go home. He knows he has to leave. He just doesn't want to yet. So he has to have a little bit of time to process the realization that this isn't real, but he has to want it to leave, which is same as truth. He kisses her and she vanishes. She's returned to the Nines. Just like the other two Nines just manifested, they just appeared. She's now vanished because she doesn't belong here. She's an apparition, really. And she only came here to fulfill her role in reminding him of who he really is. Now that that role is done, she can go back home. And now the rest is up to him. He can't live in two worlds. G returns to his fake family. Ironically, he says, let's go home, even though he knows the truth, she knows the truth, they all know the truth, and they all pretend not to. Remember, he left the car because the battery had died. And he now returns to the car. He has not gotten any help for the car. Nothing has changed with the car and the battery, but he just gets in the car and drives away. Now, the reason he can do this is because he's in God mode. He knows the true nature of this reality. He knows he's in full control. He can do anything now. And so he doesn't need to manually fix the car because it's not really broken, because it doesn't really exist. Neither G nor M can sleep, and they have the conversation they've been avoiding. They both know it's time for him to go, but still, he's torn between two worlds. He's also aware of what happens if he does leave, that he created the world. It only exists because of him. If he leaves, the world is destroyed. So he says that this is the last version. And we went through previous two versions, so perhaps those were the last two versions. The actor version disintegrated when he crossed the line, and the TV writer version disintegrated when he looked up to the sky and said, oh God, and realized something was off, and the world came to an end in an exit, cancel or exit. And now this world is about to end. So in a sense, they're all happening simultaneously. However, the previous two worlds ended before this one. G breaks the string that binds him to this reality. He cuts ties with it. The world disintegrates and he returns to where he belongs, a diamond. He's a diamond in M's eye. We live in an I, the you and I verse, but also the diamond pattern of this reality, the IXXI, and that is the fabric of this reality, the network, the matrix. She's consciously aware of the previous existence because she's in awe of the world around her. She examines her face in the reflection of the toaster, and she still looks the same. she notices that she's married to the comedian she was married to in scenario number 2, where she was Melissa McCarthy, and the little girl is her daughter and doesn't need to sign anymore, and they live in the house that the actor, writer, and video game creator lived in. All of the things that were present in all of the other realities have collapsed into the singularity, into one. He put all the pieces together. He remembered who he really is. He's left the world behind, and he, with a thought, has left this world as one so that she could stay living in it, because he couldn't tolerate the idea of killing all of the people he created. It's the best of all possible worlds. So that's it for Decoding the Nines. If you'd like to know more about this subject, a great video to watch is on my backup channel called One Story Collapse. It explains how this is happening in real life right now. If you haven't seen my Decode on Free Guy, I'll leave a link in the description box. It's on BitChute. Please go see it. It's a very similar film. Also, if you haven't seen my Decode on Dark Shadows, please go see it, and please watch my videos on Johnny Depp, because it is all connected. It will all help you understand deeper truths about your reality, why you're here, and who you are. Thanks for listening. Hope you're having a good day. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.